Hey everyone, welcome to Shooting the Shit Uncensored. I am your host, Piers Austin. I just wanted to say thank you guys for coming on and watching this show. I will be bringing on the Messiah very soon. He's a former XPW World Champion, former XPW King of the Deathmatch Champion, former CZW Ironman Champion, and former CZW World Champion. He'll be coming on in a minute. First, I just wanted to say special thanks to Brothers of the Belt, Wrestling Review Society, Generational Wrestling Society, that should be. Love those wrestling belts, WCW Nation, and Defend Deathmatch Wrestling International, as allowing us to stream in their group and to make our audience even that little bit bigger. So without further ado, I'm going to bring him in. This is the Messiah. Buddy, how you going?
Hey, how's it going, Piers?
Thanks for having me, man. Oh man, look, it's an absolute pleasure to have you on. Before we get started, tell us a little bit about your background. Where were you born and raised?
Born in essentially Detroit, Michigan, but I was raised in California, basically, like LA. I basically spent all my life. I mean, I've lived everywhere, but for some reason, I always come back here to LA. Got my start with a place called Slammer's Wrestling Gym. Just wanted to be a pro wrestler like everybody else. And back when I started, which was in '96, it wasn't like it was like the infancy of the internet. Maybe like AOL was around, but you couldn't just go and look for wrestling schools or anything like that. And that's all I ever wanted to do growing up, to the point where my dad was getting kind of pissed off about it. But the only thing I ever saw about a wrestling school was the Ultimate Warriors Wrestling School. It was on WWE TV. And I think he wanted it's like you had to send in $30 for some kind of packet, and sent it in and got like this packet back with all these photos and all this cool stuff. But I think he wanted like $200 for like a no BS seminar or something like that, where you just would fly to Arizona and hear him talk. And that was basically it. And I wasn't about to do that. And,
100%.
So they had this thing called Slammers Wrestling out here that I knew about as a kid. And my dad brought it up to me about, hey, what about that place, Slammers? I was like, oh, yeah, okay, I'll give him a call. And it just kind of snowballed from there, and joined the school and started my training there.
Yeah, right. And that's where we have someone, Stacey Cooper. Hello, thank you for joining us. And you mentioned Slammers University, and that's where obviously you met guys like Dynamite D, and also White Trash Johnny Webb, who you worked with a lot, obviously in the infancy of the early 2000s. How did you find, obviously going into wrestling for the obviously going in and taking the first bump and going through that training process and learning? Was it everything that you thought it would be, or was it like, damn, I didn't think it was going to be this hard, to take a bump, or did you just take to it naturally?
Actually, I took to it kind of naturally. The guy who owned it was a guy named Vern Langdon, who I've since found out, Vern has passed on, but I've since found out, because he would always talk about like horror movies and stuff like that. The guy did work on like the first Planet of the Apes. The guy's like a legend in Hollywood in regards to like prosthetics and stuff. I had no idea. It wasn't like he bragged about that stuff. I just found it out casually watching a Planet of the Apes documentary, and they mentioned Vern Langdon. I was like, well, that's Vern. I'm like, I had no idea. But he, to his credit, he's like, I got him on the phone. He's just like, hey, come down, check out what we're doing, see what you're getting yourself into. They were doing shows in Bakersfield every Thursday at the time. So that was about 90 minutes away from where I lived. So my dad and I went down there, watched the show. And during Vern's match, I forgot who, I think he was wrestling a guy named El Toro Bravo, but he busted El Toro Bravo open. And I thought it was awesome. I thought it was great. My dad the whole time's telling me, oh, it's fake blood. It's fake. I was like, no, dude. I mean, Vern was laying it in. It wasn't like, and there's like 10 people in the crowd. It wasn't like these huge crowds or anything like that.
Yeah.
And so when I went and did the first class with him, he just had me grapple with him. And then the last thing he did was, all right, I'm going to teach you a chop. Like, okay. And Vern was this huge, big dude with these big meat hands. and I was a 160-pound kid, and he chops me in the chest, and I thought my lungs were going to explode, but I didn't sell it. And he said, do it back to me. I was like, all right. So I did it back to him, and he and I just kept on going back and forth until he said, okay, that's enough. And my chest was blistered and everything, and I barely made a dent on his chest. But that was Vern's way of testing to see if this kid wanted to actually be here. Because it wasn't, Slammers was very unique in the respect that it wasn't like, okay, it's $2,000 down and you pay, $50 every week or $25 every week. It wasn't like that. It was, all right, it's $25 a class. Had it been $2,000 down, there's no way I could have afforded it. There's just no way. And even $25 a class, I was telling my daughter, who just turned 19, my first job I ever got was $4. I was making $4.25 an hour. So $25, that I got to work a bunch of hours for that.
Yeah, no, 100%.
So, he just said, and he sat me down and was like, hey, none of us are getting rich off this. We do this because we love it. We all have other jobs. No one's trying to take your money. It's like, okay. And so after he did that initial class with me with the chopping and everything, he's like, all right, you can go to the beginner's class. And in that first class initial session with Vern, he had me do back bumps. And, if you can't back bump, you can't work, you can't wrestle. And he told me I got it pretty quick. He said, I haven't seen anybody get it that quick ever. So I caught on to it really, really quick. And I loved it. I loved every aspect of it. When I started doing the beginner's class, they would have, I guess the guys who were more seasoned would come in the next class, and he would ask in the beginner's class, hey, does anybody want to stay? Essentially, they needed a crash test dummy. They needed someone to throw around. And I would volunteer. I'd go, yeah, let me do it. I'm up for it. And I couldn't get enough of it, to the point where my main trainer, Carlos, who wrestled in XPW as Carlito Montana, he had a key, and we would go in there when there wasn't classes on, and we would just wrestle with each other and try new things. And he'd ask me, what do you want to learn? I want to learn how to do a moonsault. All right. And so I'd start doing moonsaults, and we didn't have crash pads or anything like that. It was just doing moonsaults. Almost killing myself trying to do a moonsault in front of nobody except Carlos, and he'd laugh at me.
I actually remember seeing or seeing in an interview that you said that you had a media or news company come down to do filming in the school, and you were like new in, and you want to tell that story?
Yeah, actually, I completely forgot about that story until you brought it up. Yeah, it was that was my first day in the beginner's class. They had like hard copy or some kind of news story people there, and they were doing a story on pro wrestling for whatever reason, and they wanted the host to walk through the guys as they're working and grappling and everything, and she would say whatever she's going to say, and then when she would leave the ring, they just wanted us beating the crap out of each other. Yeah, it's like, okay. So Vern said, hey, Carlos, this is Billy Carlos. Billy knows how to do a back bump. He can do a slam. He can lock up, but that's all he can do. So take care of him. And Carlos was like, okay. I later found out Carlos was like, oh shit, why do I get the new guy? Because he wants to show off for the friggin' cameras. Yeah, so they do the whole thing. Okay, this is what you guys are going to do. Great. So we start locking up, blah, blah, blah. She walks through, does her little bit. And all of a sudden, she leaves the ring. And that's when the guys are supposed to just start slamming each other. Carlos kicks me in the gut, gets me in a tiger bomb, which I had never taken a power bomb. I hadn't taken anything. A tiger bomb. He picked me up and just, planted me in the mat with the tiger bomb, and then cut. And I no-sold it. I was like, okay, it didn't really hurt. Later on, after I got to know Carlos and talking to him and everything, because Carlos would only give me compliments when he was drunk. And in fact, I had gone to Ed Ferrara's house. Ed Ferrara, who used to be a writer for WWE. Yeah. Ed was a great wrestler. I mean, it's not like how Jim Cornette describes him as this guy who's never been in the wrestling business and didn't know what he was doing. He knew what he was doing, because he used to wrestle on the indie circuit in California. And I got to be part of the cool guys, because they were like the cool guys to us. But they invited me to go to Ed's house to watch the first ever ECW pay-per-view. And during then, when Carlos was drinking, he started paying me compliments and he said, I know you'd be good because that first day you went with it. And I'm like, what are you talking about? He goes, when I gave you the tiger bomb? I'm like, yeah. He goes, you went with it. You didn't fight it. You didn't, try to brace for it. You just went with it. It's like, oh, okay. And that was like the closest compliment I ever really got to that point. But I just went with it. It was, it definitely caught my attention doing it. But yeah, he just kicked me in the gut. Didn't give me an Iggy, or didn't give me like, hey, I'm going to do this to you. He just kicked me in the gut and tiger bombed me. And it wasn't a regular power bomb. It was a tiger bomb, like boom. And I just went with it. And, from there, that's kind of like how my training started.
You're very lucky that you actually did have that natural instinct to go with it, because if it was someone else who wasn't picking it up quite straight away, they could have got some.
Seriously, yeah. And with Slammer's training too, it wasn't like, again, this is I didn't have any dirt sheets. I didn't know anything about dirt sheets or anything like that. To me, it was all real, kind of.
Yeah.
And they didn't smart me up to anything. Even during the class, it was like, okay, this is what we do. Essentially, it was like, okay, you're working with the other guy, but they never smart me up on anything. And so they made me grapple. You would grapple until I wouldn't be physically tired, but I couldn't even hold anything in my hand because of just trying to make guys tap and things like that. And doing that, and I was taught stiff. Like, we were really kicking each other and hitting each other. It was just, that's the way they taught it. And I remember Carlos telling me, during my first match, right before I was about to go out, or maybe not even before I was going to, that's maybe an hour or two before the match, he then took me aside and said, okay, this is how it works. I'm like, what do you mean? He goes, okay, this is how it works. You're working with the guy, you know that already, but you can work light, you can work stiff. And guys used to complain that I was too stiff because that's the way I was taught. And then Carlos one day, he told me, he'd go, you'll get it. One day it'll just click. You'll get it. And it wasn't until my first match in XPW, when I was under a blue hood and I was throwing punches, all of a sudden I got light. Like, I could throw a convincing punch without hurting the guy now. I don't know how it happened. I don't know why it happened. It just started clicking. And then I was like, oh, now I get it. I don't think, had I been taught any other way but that, I don't think not that I was good or anything like that, but you can tell when a guy is working light or doesn't want to hurt a guy. The secret is looking like you're killing the guy, but you're not killing the guy. Like, Bret Hart was my favorite wrestler growing up, and he was convincing in everything he did. And I always tried to emulate what Bret Hart did, because when he threw a punch, he looked like he was throwing a punch. When he was kicking. And guys liked working with me too, because I was 166 pounds soaking wet, and they can just throw me around. So they started calling me Car Crash Billy, because I looked like I went through a car crash when they would like throw me around the ring. So,
Jesus. It's funny that you make mention of it, obviously, how professional wrestling is to look and everything like that. And I remember hearing one story that a match that Mick Foley had with Shawn Michaels, and they actually worked all the boys in the back, where they set up like this certain spot, and it looked like Shawn had got the shits and just walked over and started beating the shit out of Mick Foley. And everyone in the back apparently was like steaming, and like they're just like laughing back. We worked everyone, you know what I mean? And I think to be able to do that and to get to that level, and that's what people have to understand. Professional wrestling, it's a predetermined sport, but I mean, like, it's very, very, like, it's, fake it's not, predetermined, yes. And to make it, as good as what, guys like you were able to do, and obviously guys that are doing it now, it takes a lot of training and time to do that. How did you find, once you were sort of working on the indie circuit, to get bookings? Did you find it like you were able to get bookings relatively easy? Were you having to really grind to get on shows?
Well, that was the thing about Slammers. It was Vern, as much as he would teach you, or the in-ring aspect, he never taught you how to get bookings. He never taught you, because he didn't want anybody to leave. I mean, I loved Vern and I loved Slammers, but they didn't They weren't teaching you how to get work. And I mean, I eventually left Slammers because I'd been there for about 2 years, and we would do shows, and in doing that, we would take the ring and set up the ring and everything, and we would disassemble the ring after the show and everything. But Slammers had this thing where a lot of guys left, not in the best terms with Vern, and Dynamite D being one of them. Because I knew Dynamite D from the radio. That's how I found out about Slammers, was because he had a internet wrestling, that wasn't internet, but it was a cable wrestling show, and it was he would always plug Slammers. That's how I found out about Slammers when I was like 15 or 14 years old. I even called Dynamite D and was asking him, got on the air with him and was asking him about, like, I asked him 2 questions. I asked him, how are the Hart Foundation ever going to get back together? And how do you become a pro wrestler? And he totally kayfabed me. He was just like, well, you kind of have to know somebody in the business, or be a relative of somebody in the business. Completely kayfabed me on the whole thing. And years later, when I was 18, my dad's the one, like I said, who brought up, hey, what about that Slammers place? I was like, okay, and they were still around, but they never taught you how to get bookings. I literally, when I left Slammers, or Slammers closed down, my first real indie show I ever did, and I don't remember the name of it. I did it with Carlos. I can't remember if Ed Ferraro was with us or not. I think I did the second show with him for the same promotion. Yep. But it was, my first payday was $25, $30, which was cool with me, because I was used to wrestling for free. I was used to paying $25 because that was part of my schooling. Wrestling in front of a live crowd, and did that. In fact, that was the first show I ever did. That's the first show I ever met Supreme and Chaos on, was that show. Yeah. And did that show, and the guy who was promoting it, I don't remember his name or anything like that, but this guy was such a blowhard, talking about how he bought airtime on like Fox Sport West and everything, and you guys need to go out there and do this. Meanwhile, it's just like one little camera over in a corner. Like, this isn't like a production thing. Like, even then I knew this guy was bullshitting. Yeah. And I eventually left. I stopped wrestling for a little bit, just because I was 18, 19 years old, and I got the ex-girlfriend, or got the girlfriend trying to keep. My parents were leaving, and just, all the crap you deal with when you're that age. Sure, my parents left. I left California for about 6 months, and I ended up moving back. And in that time, I guess that's when XPW started, and I kept in contact with Carlos, and he was telling me what's going on at Slammers and whatnot. And that was the biggest gripe with us, was just, we weren't doing anything at Slammers except wrestling at Slammers. It wasn't like we were getting work on, WWE TV as jobbers or anything like that, or nothing was ever happening. And he told me about XPW. Was getting excited about it. He's like, hey, they actually have a gimmick for me and everything. I was like, oh, that's good for you. And I didn't know anything. I didn't know what XPW was. One day I was watching WWE Raw, and these commercials start coming up for XPW. And I'm watching it, and I'm like, wait, I know that guy. That White Trash Johnny Webb. I was like, wait, I used to wrestle with him. And then he's with Missy Hyatt. I was like, what? Missy Hyatt's with him? What? And then I see Homeless Jimmy. I'm like, holy shit. And there's Dynamite D. I'm like, I know these guys. And I didn't put 2 and 2 together when I spoke to Carlos. I'm telling Carlos about this. He goes, oh yeah, that's the federation. That's the company I'm going to work for. I was like, really? And then he mentioned that my name had come up a couple times about whatever, I don't know. Just the guys remembered me, and he asked if I'd be interested. And I was like, yeah, of course I'll be interested. That's the thing. I never, outside of XPW, I've been very lucky where I've gotten to work. I've never had to be one of these guys who, and maybe I should have been, but I never one of these guys who put out, my promo tape, or put out my 8x10s and send them off. Yep. I just never did that. And XPW, or not XPW, but Slammers never taught us that anyway. So I got lucky. I was just in the right place at the right time for a lot of the things I guess I fell into or got to be a part of.
Sure. And you mentioned it, getting to work for XPW, and obviously going and working for Rob Black. in going there, how did you find, like, when you obviously going into that promotion for the first time, and obviously knowing about their ties to the pornographic industry? What were your initial thoughts going in and working for them?
The funny thing is, I didn't know who Rob Black was. I had no idea there was any porn ties until my first day showing up for training with the guys. We're about to walk in, and Carlos tells me, "Oh, hey, yeah, just so you know, they shoot adult movies here." And and then he said, he said, and he goes, "I think the owner's Jewish too, so don't make any Jewish jokes." And I was like, "I don't make Jewish jokes." It's like, okay, okay, fine. I didn't matter to me anyway. I don't do that anyway.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so walked in, and it wasn't like there was all this porn stuff or anything.
Mm.
I didn't. It didn't. Yeah, when you walked in, nothing told me that this was an adult film company. It was just this, office, this hole in the wall in the valley, and went in there, and I was like, hey, there was Dynamite D, and hey, what's up, guys? Hey, what's going on? Saying hello to them. And
Yeah.
in fact, the week before they had done a show, I actually paid to go to the show. I don't think I've ever told anybody this because I
Oh,
always
really?
forget it. I paid to go to the show. I just went to the show and stood in line with everybody and watched the show. And I was like, oh, watched it. And then when the show was done, I waited and I saw Dynamite D, and he goes, hey, what's up? I'm like, and we're talking and everything. Cause I think Carlos might have debuted that night. I can't remember. And then the following week or the following Tuesday, because XPW the wrestlers used to meet on Tuesdays. I showed up at the Tuesday meeting where we would train and everything, and trained, and we were out there just doing stuff. And I knew a lot of the guys, or I was familiar with a lot of the guys. And then I saw Chaos and Supreme again, and I hadn't seen those guys since the couple of shows that I had done for the One Fed. And we were talking, we started training, and then I knew I had met Kevin Kleinrock, who was like the VP of XPW. Kevin was there. Kevin was actually a guy who went to Slammers to try to learn the business, but Vern wouldn't teach him anything. He was kayfabing him on the whole thing. So Kevin left Slammers, but he came by a couple times, and I talked to him, and it was a nice guy. And after the training, they had a big meeting. And I wasn't going to go into the meeting. And if I remember right, I think D, I don't know if it was D, but Kevin and White Trash Johnny Webb were like, yeah, come on, come into the meeting. It's like, okay. So I just sit down in the meeting. All the chairs are taken, so I'm just squatting, like, up front. And Rob sits down, and Rob, everyone's talking, and he basically like tells everybody, shut the F up. And then he looks straight at me and goes, who the F are you? And I was like, I'm Billy. I've wrestled with these guys. And Johnny Webb looked at Rob or said, no, he's good. He's solid. He's good. Because I didn't know at the time, but Webb was working for the adult film company side doing editing. So
Yeah, right.
he had Rob's ear. And basically that's how my journey into XPW started. It was that simple. And then the guys told me that they were going to come the next day after that Tuesday meeting. They were going to come on that Wednesday and train. I showed up, and nobody showed up. I think Jasmine St. Clair was shooting a scene, so a bunch of the boys went to go watch her shoot the scene or something like that. And I just stayed there, and I hadn't been in a wrestling ring in over a year. So I was just in there beating the crap out of myself, making myself bump, running myself in the corner, running the ropes and everything, just getting acclimated to the whole ring again. And every now and then Rob would, because his office was right next to where the ring was, he would peek his head out, look, wouldn't say anything. And that was that. I was there probably for like 2 hours, left, showed up at the next meeting the following week. And right after we all trained, went into the office, and Rob sits down and he goes, all right, hey, where were all you guys last week? All you guys were supposed to be here to train. The only one that was here was this guy, and he was beating the crap out of himself. And that was it. It was that simple. I think they were having because they were doing monthly shows, and they were going to do a battle royal, and they needed bodies for the battle royal. And I was like, hey, if you guys need a body, I'll do it. I was just happy to be there. And they made the decision right then and there. They're like, no. Yeah, we can use him, but we need to put a mask on him. We don't want to waste him just yet. Put a mask on him. It's like, okay. And that's how I got that stupid blue mask on me and the lunatic gimmick. Hey, that was a total rib. That was just, it was a blue mask. If it was a pink mask, I would have been the pinkatic or something, or the reditic. There was no thought put behind it whatsoever.
One of the things we just have a comment up here from Stephen Robinson, better known as Corporal Robinson. Billy's one of the best guys I feuded with in the CZW angle.
Oh, Corp is great. Yeah,
I had him on the show about a week or two ago, and he's an awesome dude. He was just a very easy guy to talk to, much like yourself. So obviously working in the XP for XPW and being the lunatic, when did the whole Messiah gimmick come out? Like, I understand that the original, and correct me if I'm wrong, the original thought to call you was Jesus, and when that was presented to you, you were like, "Fuck that!" No, that's
I'm not doing that. No way. Originally, they wanted they put me under the mask, and that was essentially just a placeholder until they could figure out something for me. And when I was in Slammers, like my gimmick was Iron Mike Earhart, the All-American boy. And I was told I could never be a heel because I had too much of a baby face. And in XPW, and this is when wrestling was kind of, I always hate saying the Attitude Era or whatever. It's just so stupid, but it was right around there where you couldn't be a white mean baby face anymore. People, they hated that. People hated that. They wanted to see the good guy just get his head taken off and get the crap kicked out of him. And that was heavily influenced, I think, with ECW, because ECW, you couldn't do that in ECW. And I ended up with Rob. Originally I was going to be in a tag team called the Moral Crusaders, Luke and Matthew. We were supposed to be like these Bible thumping brothers that would
like Luke Hawks. They did that later on.
Yeah, they repackaged it with Luke. Yeah, with Luke Hawks. But we were supposed to be these guys who preached against XPW, against the sex and the violence and blah blah blah. But we would cheat. We would cheat to win. And after a couple months, of me doing the lunatic thing, I ended up. I was getting sick and tired of Nicole Bass dropping me on my head. I just hated it. And I had a meeting with Rob and said, "Hey, I'd like to do the Moral Crusader thing as a singles. We'll do it as a singles." Because they had a guy in mind to be my tag partner, but then the guy just fell off the face of the earth. No one could ever find him. No one knew whatever happened to him. So the Moral Crusader tag team was kind of on hold, and I just said, let me do it as a singles, and then once someone comes that can fit the bill or that could be paired with me, then you have your tag team, and I've already established it. And Rob was just like, okay. And in the meeting, it was, I think Johnny Webb was there, Supreme was there, and Kevin Kleinrock was there. And Rob was like, kind of hesitant about it. And I think it was Supreme or Johnny Webb, just like, let the guy try it. Jeez, just let him try. What's the harm in it? And Rob's like, well, no, if I really want to push this, if this is a good character, if this really works, I really want to push it. Essentially, he didn't want to waste it just because I didn't want to be, the lunatic anymore. And he essentially looked at me and said, all right, I'll give you this shot. You get one shot, but if you F it up, that's it. I was like, okay, fine. And then as far as I knew, I was going to be Luke, the Moral Crusader. That was going to be my name. And then the next week, I'm sitting, lacing up my boots to go to practice. Rob walks by and he goes, hey, what's up, Jesus? And I went, excuse me? He goes, Jesus. And Rob had this, he always talked with his hands and stuff, and he was always animated. He goes, that's right, you're going to be Jesus. And I went, no, I can't. Well, why can't you? Well, because I'm Christian. I go to church. I've been to Brazil. I've built churches. I don't know. I'm not going to be Jesus. No. And Kevin was on my side with that. He was just like, yeah, give the guy a break. He doesn't want to do it. Okay. So then up to my first show, I don't think a name was ever really decided upon. And when Guido, the guy, the ring announcer's name was Guido, he introduced me as Jesus. It was like, no, I'm not. No, I'm not. No, I can't. And I remember getting up to Guido and like, don't call me that. Don't call me that. And then the choice was either going to be the Savior or the Messiah. And at that point, I just said, I don't care as long as it's not Jesus. And then it was just Messiah. I mean, it was that simple. Or it wasn't like, I mean, for all I know, they flipped a coin, and that's how they came up with Messiah. And I never really had any gripes about the Messiah thing, only because, Messiah, people, they hear Messiah and they think it means Jesus, or it means God, or no, it means the chosen one. That's it. Just people, they always want to put their baggage on whatever it is, but it just means the chosen one. That's all.
Yeah.
And since then, there's been, I don't know, I mean, now Seth Rollins is the Monday Night Messiah. There's been, the technical Messiah, Alex Shelley. There was Redneck Messiah, Jamie Noble. What was it? The Messiah, the Backbreaker. So like, and people ask me if I get mad with that. I'm like, I don't just, make $1 million with it. Go for it. I always hated the name. Go for it, man. Make $1 million with it.
When I saw Seth Rollins do the Monday Night Messiah straight away, like I just thought of you. You know what I mean? Like it was just like coming straight back. I was like what the fuck?
I was even like, all of a sudden I got all these messages about it, and I was just like, good for him, cool. I mean, I've kept it no secret that I've always hated that name, and I was brought up in the business where you never chose your name; it was kind of given to you. Like I never would have called myself Mike Earhart, Iron Mike Earhart, or definitely wouldn't have called myself Blunatic. And the Messiah thing just came. It was like, all right, you're Messiah, and even after I might be jumping ahead here, but even after I left XPW, there was this whole thing about, well, XPW owns the name Messiah and everything. I was like, they don't own anything. I never signed anything. I never did anything like that. If I want to call myself Messiah, I'm going to call myself Messiah. And it just, I mean, I kind of did it as a way just to stick it to them. But then I just got stuck with it, and it's like no one's going to pay to see William Welch wrestle. So I was like, all right, I'll be Messiah, and it just stuck, and I've kind of made my peace with the name. But when I see someone else try to use it, or if they have it, good, go do it. Make $1 million with it. I just, I unfortunately I'm like I don't do a whole lot of interviews. I don't, not because I think I'm this cool guy or anything like that.
No.
But honestly, it's because people don't want to hear what I have to say, and also I'm a hermit by nature. I get like this whole thing with fame and whatnot, and by no means am I ever famous, and I've been recognized outside of wrestling. Maybe I can count on two hands. Like it's not like I always got recognized, but my wife even made comments about how it makes me uncomfortable. I would, hey, what's up? Hey, what's going on? I don't know how to act. I'm just very introverted that way. And when people would see me wrestle, because especially in XPW, people I went to high school would show up to the shows and see me wrestle, and they would say, I can't believe that's you, because I'm aggressive and I'm yelling. I mean, I could tell you right now, I'd put $1,000 down right now if you ask anybody I went to high school with who William Welch is, they would say I have no idea, because that wasn't me. It wasn't me.
So we have a comment or a question here from Corporal Robinson, and he's actually amended it. So he wants to know your best area or favorite area to work. Was it Philly, Cali, Detroit, or Louisville?
I mean, I got to go with Philly on that one, only because if you, especially back then, like if you can get over in Philly, like you can get over anywhere. Philly, they were cutthroat, man. If they didn't like you, they let you know. And I was very lucky, for whatever reason. I was able to connect with the Philly crowd. I don't know if Corp remembers this, but when I wrestled in Detroit, one of the reasons I wrestled out there, the biggest reason was because my family. was out there, and they were finally going to see me wrestle. My grandmother in particular, and so she went to the show and everything. And during the match, I believe it was me and Adam Flash versus Corporal Robinson and Too Tough Tony, and we're just beating the crap out of each other. And I get either Corp or Tony. I think it was Corp in a headlock, and I'm just in the middle of the ring. I got him in a chin lock, and I all of a sudden I make eye contact with my grandmother, and I just yell, "Hi, Grandma," and I waved her. And everybody started laughing, and then my grandmother starts acting like she's like the Queen of England, starts doing this to everybody, like that's one of the best memories I have in wrestling, because they never got to see me wrestle. I enjoyed doing those shows in Detroit with like Corp and everything, because we could, Huck, the guy who owned the company and everything, we could do whatever we wanted. Louisville, I like the crowd in Louisville, but they were, at the time we were doing like the CZW versus IWA stuff. And they hated my ass because I wasn't an IWA guy. So, I was the old school guy. Like, if I'm a heel outside of the ring as well. So, in IWA, it was like a 3-day or 2-day thing that we were doing. So we would run into fans like at the mall or something while we just had some time off, and I'd be a dick at the mall and everything. And wow, that guy's a real dickhead. It's like, yeah. Well, I'm a heel. I'm supposed to be one. Like, all right.
live the gimmick,
Yeah.
I mean? But, so back to XPW. The first time I saw you wrestle, and we're talking before backstage that, I first saw about, XPW, CCW in wrestling magazines, and then started becoming, buying and tapes and DVDs. And I saw you wrestle for the first time on Baptized in Blood 1, which was the first XPW King of the Deathmatch tournament. What was your thoughts going into to that sort of tournament? When I was I love deathmatch wrestling, and when I was younger, I was really into it. But as I got older, watching deathmatch wrestling, I just sit there and go, man, like, why would someone do that? What would it take for someone to go through that and to put themselves through that? And by not meaning any disrespect, but it's just like, what would you need to prepare for that? What would you be going through your mind just before you go in to do that, and especially for the first time?
Yeah, no, I completely understand it. Again, my favorite wrestler growing up was Bret Hart. Bret Hart is the furthest thing away from deathmatch wrestling. When I did my first deathmatch, it was just to, hey, let me do this once. I didn't know anything about deathmatch wrestling, had no idea. The only thing, if you were to say deathmatch wrestling to me, I would think ECW. The first ECW pay-per-view, I was at Ed Ferrara's house with Carlos, my trainers, and that main event had I think it was like Raven and Stevie Richards and Terry Funk, and they brought in a ladder and they had barbed wire, and it was, Carlos and I just looked at each other. It was like, hey, that'd be cool to say I did that once. That was it. It'd be cool to say I did that once. So fast forward to XPW, they're going to do the first King of the Deathmatch. And it was just on the whiteboard. It was like first King of the Deathmatch, and you wrote your name on the board if you wanted to be part of it. And okay, I wrote my name. Carlos wrote his name on the board. It was just to say, okay, cool. I've done this once. That was
Chaos was in that tournament as well.
Yeah, he was in it too. It was just to say I did it. That's all it was. Now, doing that tournament is what got me over with the XPW fans. Because prior to that, I'd only done matches as Messiah like once or twice, maybe 3 times. But I always took the approach of just balls to the wall. Go out there and do your best. So I had all these ideas and everything, and worked Johnny Webb the first round, did all right. Went over on Webb, and then I worked Supreme, and Supreme went over on me. But I came up with all these spots, and very much the spots I was coming up with were hurting me, is what was happening. Yes. And it got over. Again, that's all I was going to do was that tournament. That's all I was gonna do. The whole deathmatch thing was Supreme's thing. That was
Yeah.
for him. And I mean, the only way I can look at it is I guess I was too good for my own good, because then all of a sudden I was, booked in these death matches with Supreme and everything. Again, not because I like pain or because I like doing that stuff. I mean, I have people that come up to me when I do go to the shows, and they're like, "Hey, man, I loved it when you did this," or the reason I do deathmatch wrestling is because like you and Sick Nick Mondo. And I'm like, the stuff they do now, I wasn't doing razor blades, and hell no. Like I'm barely, an all right looking dude. I'm not trying to fuck myself up any more than
Yeah.
than I have to. But I always took the approach. Um, I'm not going to complain about it. I'm going to go out there and do my best.
Mm.
And during that tournament, the following month when we had our next show, I'll never forget, my music hit and this huge pop happened. And it was, I got over with the crowd because of doing those matches with Supreme and Webb, doing those because not that I was innovative or anything like that, but I was doing springboards and stuff like that.
Yeah.
No one was really doing springboard leg drops and stuff like that. I mean, now everybody does that stuff, but back then no one was really doing it. Let alone, a springboard into a thing of thumbtacks. No one was doing that. So again, I mean, it did get to a point, especially in CZW, where I had to take John aside and say, dude, I don't want to do this. And it, guys that I respected, like Christopher Daniels or Frankie Kazarian, I would have matches with them, just regular one-on-one matches with them, and there was almost this like, oh shit, he can work.
Yeah.
It was like this, oh crap, you're a lot better than I thought you were. And it always kind of bugged me that the guys that I respected didn't respect me because all they thought I did was this stuff. When that wasn't my aspiration, that's not what I wanted to do. But at the same time, I never complained about it. If that's what you want me to do, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it to the best of my ability.
Yeah, no, and absolutely, and I think by the matches that you did have in XPW following that King of the Deathmatch tournament, but you were also having regular matches as well, and I've seen you work guys like Chris Candido, Shane Douglas, Vampiro, and you were having some of these amazing matches that weren't involving weapons, and as a fan, I kind of looked at XPW as just as a company that had all this talent, but just really didn't know how to pull that shit together. You know what I mean? Like, and the thing that I found almost insulting is, and I don't want to get ahead of myself here, but when you left XPW, like everyone knows there was history there between you and Rob. A disagreement was had. But to explain, because at the time you were the reigning world champion, you were also the reigning deathmatch champion, and storyline-wise, to explain, to write you off television with having like this crucifix sort of thing with like a thing with a little goatee, and then having like I've got to return to my father, like, dude, like,
no, I know,
like, I know what I mean? I was like, what the fuck?
I remember having a conversation with Kevin Kleinrock, and I said, hey, let me drop the titles. And Kevin said, Rob doesn't want you here. And he said, even if I hated your guts, Billy, I would still want you here to drop the titles. He goes, but Rob isn't having it. And I said, okay, I understand. And I jokingly said, so what are you going to say? That I went to heaven or something? And he laughed it off, and sure enough, that's what they did. They used some old footage old promo that I cut, if I remember right, like me doing the crucifixion pose, and it was Kevin doing my voice, but they tried to muffle the voice because we don't have the same voices, and that's how they explained it. That's what? That's how they explained it for whatever reason. Hey, come here. You want to come here? Come here. Hang on one second. Let me just do this real quick. You want to say hi? Say hi. Say hi.
Hello.
This is Macy.
Hey, Macy. How are you?
All right. but yeah, that's how they explained it. And I mean, that's just, if you want to talk about XPW's poor booking choices, you can start with that one and just go up and up and up. That I had nothing to do with, but they had really bad ones.
Yeah,
But
no, they made a lot of just silly business decisions, I think. And
no, they did, and unfortunately, and this is just my opinion. I think in the beginning of XPW, Rob had a bunch of money to fund it, and then he was losing money. I don't think XPW ever made any money. I really don't. I was there when they because I worked for the Extreme offices as well, and there was times where hang on one second. Hey baby, go upstairs. Okay, go upstairs. You're distracting me. You're too cute. Um, but where I had to go pick up because I would do deliveries for the Extreme side as well, for Extreme Associates, as well as for XPW. And I remember I had to go do some deliveries, and the guy who was the company that was distributing the XPW video, this VHS, this is before the DVDs were even out. I go there, and he has like all these XPW VHS tapes, and he goes, "Okay, those are all of them." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" He goes, "No, you're taking those back." I'm like, "I am." I'm like, "Okay." I took them all back because XPW had a thing where, if I remember right, it was, I think every like Best Buy had 3, XPW tapes, for each show, whatever that was, that it was. But if they didn't sell it, XPW or whoever would then buy it back. So there was all these returns, and by the time I think it got to a point where Rob was just, he was getting it from both ends, from the Extreme side. XPW is not making any money. It's taking money out of the adult side of the company. Had he not had XPW, I think he would have been fine. But, it's just not making any money. He ends up, it got to a point where it was just, let's tell the fans we have a surprise. Okay, what's the surprise? I don't know. We'll come up with it. Okay. And I wasn't at the company this time, but then they had one where they were supposed to have some kind of special surprise. They end up having like 2 homeless guys, legitimate homeless guys, come out as a surprise. They were homeless dudes that they got off the street.
Yeah.
And like that, and there was no payoff.
As I said, it was almost, as a fan, it was almost disappointing. And especially because I would be like, but like even some of the earlier tapes that I saw, like the production value was like really poor. Like I waited like months to get these tapes or DVDs. I sit down and watch it, and it's like, oh, I can't actually hear what's happening in the crowd. I can only hear you know what I mean? And like seeing that, you guys do these amazing matches, and you guys having some amazing talent there, like Damian Steele and Jake Lawless, Chris Candido, Supreme, Chaos. Chaos being one guy that I always thought over the years, I'm very surprised he never got signed and to a major company. Like he's phenomenal.
He was on. I've always told people this. I've always thought Chaos was better than me. When I first started in XPW, Chaos was the guy, like he was like the young guy that was, because Damian Steele was the champion at the time, like the first champion. They had him wrestling Damian Steele around the loop and everything. And then all of a sudden, when I came in, I think only because I could talk a little bit better than Chaos could at the time, I got pushed into that, where I was then feuding with like Sabu and Candido and New Jack and everything. It just XPW, and it was no fault of like Kevin Kleinrock. This is just all on Rob Black, but Rob had he didn't give a crap about the fans. He didn't. It was literally like the joke was, look at the bottom of the poster, subject or card subject to change. It's like, but we're telling them we're going to give them this. Well, look at the bottom of the poster, card subject to change. I think, in my opinion, Rob just started getting burnt out with dealing with wrestlers, because wrestlers can be the biggest prima donnas in the world. They can, especially someone who is an established guy and you really want them. They'll nickel and dime you. You know, they'll agree on something, and then all of a sudden it's, you know, a week before the show. You know what we agreed on? Yeah, that doesn't work for me now. We need to, you know, I need this now. So I know they were dealing a lot with that kind of stuff as well.
Yeah.
But I just think you get burnt out dealing with that stuff, man.
Yeah.
You know, and I think also with Rob was so used to things just working out for him, you know. And then this whole XPW thing happens, and everything starts out pretty good, but then it just, I've always felt bad for guys like Supreme and Chaos, because being an XPW original, or whatever you want to call it, for some
Mm.
reason after the company went under, painted you with this brush that you sucked or you weren't any good. And it
Yeah.
had nothing to do with the guys. It had everything
Oh,
to do with the management.
yeah.
Everything.
I agree. I agree. And that's where, like, Supreme, the fact that he didn't go on and wrestle in CZW, to me is like, I think the matches he could have had over there in, the time frame, that you were there with, or even a bit before then with like guys like Wife Beater, Lobo, and Zandig. I think, Zandig and Supreme could have had a
Yeah.
crazy motherfucking feud back in the day. But we talk about XPW and, obviously you leaving there. Now, look, I don't want to go into the finer details of it because everybody knows it's been well documented. You and Rob Black had a falling out. You left XPW quite abruptly. And then you were contacted by John Zandig to come and join CZW for a show. One-shot deal to wrestle Justice Payne in the first show for 2002. I think it was called Answering the Challenge. I'm not really too good with the show
Yeah,
name.
that's what they ended up calling it. I don't know if that was the name of the show, but that's what they ended up calling it, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. Obviously getting contacted by Zandig, how did that sort of come about? Like, how did you actually get into the situation of being invited into CZW?
I was at my apartment. Was at my apartment, and all of a sudden the phone rings, and for whatever reason I was screening that call. I didn't want to answer the phone, and I hear this voice go, Messiah Billy, John Zendig, CZW. And I was like, what? I thought it was Jake Wallace. I thought he was ribbing me.
Taking the piss, yeah.
Yeah, because he's from Philly too, and they sounded alike. I'm like, I was gonna go, well, Jake, what the hell are you doing? And I'm like, yeah, hello. He goes, yeah, is this Billy? I'm like, yeah. He goes, you're not with the porno guys anymore? I was like, no. He goes, well, John Zandig, CZW. I was like, oh shit, this really is John Zandig. And up to that point, all I knew about CZW was that they used a weed whacker. That's all I knew. The only thing I was familiar with was what I saw in the magazines. That's it. I didn't know who anybody was. I knew Zandig because he was always, in the magazines. But talking to him, he was asking me what I was doing that weekend. And I was like, well, I already have a booking. He's like, oh, that's too bad. I wanted you to come in and wrestle our champion, Justice Payne. I was like, oh, okay. And I told him, I'm like, hang on, let me see if I can get out of the booking, and I'll get back to you. He's like, all right, cool. So I called, and I was wrestling for a promotion. I was going to wrestle for a promotion called MPW, Millennium Pro Wrestling, I think it was. The guy who ran it was a guy named Logan Xavier, really cool guy. I called Logan, explained the situation, and he was like, dude, that's awesome. Yeah, no, you can. And I think I was the champion at the time too. And I explained him the opportunity, and he was really excited for me, and he let me out of the booking, which he didn't have to do at all. I called Zandig back, told him I could do it, and I think that was like a Wednesday. I flew out on Friday, and then had the show on Saturday. And yeah, I mean, by all accounts, I mean, I don't know if it was only meant to be one show. I just assumed it was. But it was like, all right, come in, you're going to wrestle our champion. And I knew nothing about Justice Payne. John had Z-Bar, a guy named Z-Bar, pick me up from the
I
airport.
remember Z-Bar, yeah.
Z-Bar's first words to me were, "I thought you were taller." I was like, "Oh, okay, you're a dick."
Like what a random
Yeah,
fucking thing to say.
yeah, and he does that a lot. He's a cool guy, but he was just, "I thought you were taller." I was like, "Oh, nope, this is me." And he took me to Zandig's house, and at the time, it was this huge house we called the Zanshin. It was just this huge place, talking to him and everything, and he then took me to Nick Gage and Justice Payne's house because they shared a house together. I met Nick Gage, was talking to Nikki, and Justice Payne wasn't going to be there because if I remember correctly, it was his girlfriend's birthday, so he wasn't going to be home until early in the morning or something like that. And so I talking to Nikki, I said, "Hey, do you have any video on Justice Payne?" He goes, "Yeah, I got a ton." So I stayed up all night and watched videos and matches on Justice Payne. The first video I watched, and I didn't. He gave me Cage of Death 3. It was Cage of Death 3, and they had just done that show the month prior, and I watched that show from top to bottom. I only had the intention of watching Payne's match, but I watched the show from top to bottom, and after watching it, I just thought to myself, "What the hell do they want with me? Like, these guys are awesome. Like,
Yeah.
what do they want with me?" And so I watched more Justice Payne matches. I met Payne Saturday morning, and he and I talked. Went to, and I didn't even know it was at the ECW arena. I had no idea until I watched Cage of Death 3. And I was like, I just assumed that they used the ECW arena for their big show, and then we're going to go to a different place. He's like, "No, we're wrestling at the ECW arena." I was like, "Really?" I was like, "All right." So went there. So I was super stoked to be wrestling at the ECW arena. And yeah, Payne and I got together and we put together a match. And lucky for me, everything went really well. And it was a match. And I do remember, because I had no idea I got busted open hard way during the match. I had no idea. After the match, I was going to go to the back, and I went in the locker room, and all the boys were clapping. Which we didn't do that in XPW. And so I was like, "Oh, wow, these guys are really friendly." I was like, "Wow, these guys are really nice." And guys were coming up to me saying, good match, good match. And as I was getting my head stapled, Zandig just came up to me, just, like passing by. I was like, "Hey, you want to come back next month?" It's like, "Yeah, that would be great." He's like, "All right." And that was it. And from there, I was part of CZW.
That's amazing. And, you had quite a career with CZW, being there. But shortly after debuting in CZW, and I hope you don't mind me bringing this up, and if you want, we can sort of skip over it. But, you went to a XPW show. You were invited to go by one of the boys. I think it was GQ Money that you've mentioned in the past.
Yeah.
He gave you the ticket and told you and Sick Nick Mondo to come to the show. You went to the show. You want to tell me that story? You want to talk about that?
Yeah, sure. It's no problem. Yeah, went to the show because we had done a show. Mondo was brought out, and I can't remember the name of the federation, but he did a show. And actually, I think did Mondo stay with me? I can't remember if he stayed with me or not, but we went to like a house party. And at the house party was like Supreme and Chaos. It was at GQ Money's. Mm-hmm. And at the time, I remember GQ Money was doing the Clockwork Orange thing.
Yep.
And he was calling himself Ultra Violent. And CZW's big tagline was, "We're ultra violent." And I was kind of ribbing him, going, "Hey, Mondo, you're not ultra violent. He's ultra violent. Look at this guy. He's ultra violent." Like just kind of needling GQ Money. And he never liked me to begin with. And yeah, he met something about the show, and someone mentioned about going to the show. And I was like, "Dude, I can't go to the shows," because I after I'd gotten fired from XPW, I showed up to a training session maybe a couple months after that. That was at the XPW office. Rob wasn't there, and we trained. And Rob got word that I was there, and he just started throwing a hissy fit about it. Like, "Why was he here? You guys are betraying me. What are you doing?" Like, he was just being such a little girl about it. So I was like, "Dude, there's no way I'm going to a show. He's going to flip out,
Yeah.
And GQ Money brought up, I got passes because they would flyer their shows. And so we had the passes. We did the show the next day. whatever show that we did, and then that night was their show. So we went to the show, and we went there and watched the show. I was up in the nosebleed section because I didn't want anybody to see me, and Mondo was like mingling with everybody and getting recognized, and everything. He was loving it.
Yeah.
And I mean, the only reason I went there was to support the boys, because as much as I didn't like the management, I still had a relationship with Chaos and Supreme and Dynamite D and everything, and we would still talk to each other and hang out with each other. And went to the show, and for whatever reason, stuff just wasn't going well during that show. It wasn't. And I got I'm trying to remember. I got a call on my cell phone from Dynamite D, and I answered it saying hello, and he said, "You need to go." I'm like, "What do you mean I need to go?" He goes, "You're causing a disturbance," or something to that effect. I'm like, "What do you mean I'm causing a disturbance?" He goes, "You being here is causing a disturbance." Apparently, Rob was flipping out because he found that I was there. And now that I think about it, yeah, it wasn't like I was hiding. When I went to the ticket booth, one of Rob's office guys was working the ticket booth, and I jokingly said, he looked at me and his eyes got all big. And he was like, what was his name? We just called him a G-Man. That's all. His nickname was G-Man, because every other word out of his mouth was G. What's up, G? What's up? Like, everything was G. And he looked at me. He said something to the effect of, "You're not going to cause any problems, right?" I'm like, no, I'm just here to support the show. And I put down my free pass. I slammed it. I went, "I'm here to see the greatest wrestling show in the world." Like that. And he was like, okay. And he gave me the tickets to go in. He gave us the tickets to go in.
Yeah.
Or he allowed us to go in. So now that I think about it, that's how Rob knew I was there. And then I get the call from D. And back then, I was an angry kid. I wanted to, I had this "I'll be damned" attitude. Like, you're not going to tell me what I'm going to do kind of thing. Which I think a lot of like 20-something-year-old guys are that way to a certain extent. But when it came to Rob tried to act like he was a tough guy, and he would try to be intimidating to people. And working for him and working with him, he didn't like confrontation. He didn't like if someone would show up at the office and wanting, to get paid for whatever they did, and he didn't have the money. It was like, "Hey, Billy, go out there and just ask him to leave." Okay, I'd go out there and ask him to leave. He never wanted confrontation. And when I got that call from Dynamite D, I saw red. I was like, motherfucker. Like, and then why is or D told me that he's getting mad at all the boys, and I just remember, why are you getting mad at those guys? Those guys had nothing to do with this. And so I called Kevin Kleinrock on his cell phone, and I think his wife answered. And I started telling her, "You need to tell Kevin and Rob not to yell at the boys. This is bullshit. If he wants to yell at somebody, yell at me." It was just, again, I don't know where I got the balls to be that way. It was stupid. It was just stupid all around. And I left. So I left. And the very next day, I got a call from Johnny Webb. And Webb and I we were cordial to one another, but it wasn't like we had a relationship where we would talk to each other on the phone. We were never that way. So getting a call from Webb was like, well, why is Webb calling me? So I started talking to him, and he said, "So I heard you didn't like my match." And that night he wrestled Shane Douglas, and the match was horrible. It was a horrible match. I later found out, and you could tell Webb's knees. I don't know if it was his knees or one knee, but his knee was killing him. He always had knee problems. And so he had to get knee surgery, but it wasn't a good show. You could tell Webb's knees were really, really hurting him and everything. And we were just talking, and he goes, "I've always liked you, Billy. We've always gotten along, but you need to watch yourself." I'm like, "What do you mean I need to watch myself?" He goes, because Rob would, make threats all the time to people and yell and blah, blah, blah. He goes, "This one essentially was like telling me, this is different. You need to watch yourself. I don't want to see you get hurt." I was like, "Okay, thanks, man." Didn't think anything of it. And then I want to say, was it a week later or 2 weeks later? That's when I had the attack on me.
Yeah.
So I mean, when the attack happened, and I saw those guys, I knew exactly why they were there and why they, who sent them. I've read, or I've been told that the reason I got attacked was because I owed bookies money. I've never bet a game in my life. I don't bet. I go to Vegas. If I lose $20, I start sweating bullets. I don't bet. I'm not one of those guys. Just all these other reasons why, like it couldn't have been Rob who sent these guys. It was Rob. I know he won't admit it now. Or I mean, he's never admitted it. That it's all folklore and whatnot. But yeah, it was the attack happened, and after the attack happened, originally I was done wrestling. Like my parents were just like, specifically my dad was just, you got to stop this bullshit. This is getting out of hand. Blah blah blah. Yeah. And I was going to move to Georgia where my parents lived at the time, and I was agreeing to move to Georgia. One of the nights I was just by myself, and I was thinking, I'm not running. I'm not going to run. I'm not running. No, this is what I want to do. This is where I want to stay. I'm staying. And so I had that conversation with my parents about that. Like they weren't happy about that, but I'm like, no, I'm staying in California. I'm not going anywhere. I'm not going to run from this. And talked to Zandig and everything and told him what happened. And the next show was going to be, essentially less than a month later, that's when I was doing the Zandig Tournament of Survival, the Tournament of Death, or whatever. Yeah, that's when it was like 3 weeks later I was in it. And I did that just because, just me being me and my way of thinking, not because I like deathmatch wrestling or anything like that, but because it was, essentially Rob, the guy who did this. You're not going to stop me from doing what I want to do. You're just not. This is what I love to do. And nothing's going to stop me from doing it. So I actually volunteered to be in that one. I was like, dude, put me in that match. Put me in that tournament. And Zandig's like, are you sure? I'm like, yeah, put me in it.
I actually just rewatched that show, and and the match, obviously the first match you had against Adam Flash, who is another guy that I absolutely love to watch. That was a pretty much a quick roll up onto the next round. The next round was, Sick Nick Mondo. And he, like, to me, that was pretty much like back then, that was like seeing a dream match. You know what I mean? Like, you versus Mondo, and you know what I mean? Like that to me was like, all right, that's right on point. And one of our viewers just wants to know, how was your match with Mondo, and your thoughts on him? I can tell you how the match was, Facebook user. It was fucking phenomenal. But I'll let Messiah take that one.
No, thanks. I appreciate that. I love Mondo. Mondo is a great guy. And I've said this before, and I'll continue to say this. Like, Mondo has my utmost respect, just from the simple fact. I mean, he already has it because of his work and what he does, and just the kind of individual that he is and human being that he is. But when he said that he's retiring, he retired. It wasn't like, and no disrespect to like Terry Funk or anything like that or whatever, but when he's like, I'm done, because his mindset was, I've done everything that I've wanted to do. And he knew that, especially with the spots or the stunts, whatever you want to call them, that he was doing, it was just going to escalate and escalate and escalate until he was probably dead, or until he was working with somebody that died. Because Mondo's aspirations were never to be, a WWE champion or be in the WWE. He wanted to be a filmmaker. Yeah. He loves making movies. I mean, now he works for AEW. But he wanted to be a filmmaker, and he's made some really good documentaries about himself that I've really enjoyed.
Yeah, and the Unscarred one I really enjoyed. I'm trying to find how I can get a copy of the trade, but in Australia, it's like it's a lot harder to get it. You know what I mean?
I know that it's on like Amazon Prime. That's how I watched it, was Amazon Prime.
Yeah, but for us, we have an Australian Amazon Prime.
Yeah.
And it's a massive kerfuffle, like, to put it mildly. But
he I mean, working with him, as far as working with him wrestling wise, Mondo's one of these guys, very much like myself, where he would have this idea for a spot, and the spot usually ended up with him getting hurt, or it was him taking the brunt of it, because with him, because like homeless Jimmy, not to put him in the same category as homeless Jimmy got over because Jimmy would just get the crap kicked out of him. He would put himself in these in XPW. His whole thing, he never won a match, but he was one of the most popular guys there because when you watched Jimmy, you knew he was going to get the crap kicked out of him, or he was going to do some outlandish spot. Mondo, he could work, he could do these spots, and he came up with some really ingenious stuff. And he was just easy to work with. Every now and then you might get like this, random like kick that would go in your face or something like that. But working with him was a pleasure. He and I had when he and I wrestled each other for the first time in CZW. Again, I didn't know who Mondo was. I had no idea. But apparently, working with him was, or John was telling me that it's a dream match. I was like, okay, I'm up for it. Cool. And working with him was super easy. And then I got to wrestle with him out here in California, where we had our match. And that's the one that really put a spotlight on us, as far as like, hey, if you dig deathmatch wrestling, or even if you don't dig deathmatch wrestling, watching this match, you'll appreciate this, because we had wrestling in there. We were teasing things. We weren't just, as Xander would put it, slash and, just I get light tube and hit you with light tube. And, there was a lot of thought put into the matches Mondo and I had with each other. And
intelligent wrestling as well as
much as we could. And doing the one at Tournament of Death, again, that was just for Mondo. I mean, I feel bad for him because, again, you're wrestling 3 times in a row. Yeah. You're going over. And I was like, dude, no, I really want to, let me really do some stuff in this thing, because he could have easily said, no, I don't want to do this much because I got to wrestle wife beater. And that's like, you're fighting an uphill battle with that one anyway, not because wife beater isn't good, but because, he has all these ideas as well. And he could have just easily asked to take a night off with me, but he would, he was just like, no, let's go out there. This is your first match back. Let's turn it on a little bit here and see what we can get out of it. So, I mean, Mondo has my utmost respect. He's one of the guys I enjoyed wrestling the most.
Yes. And obviously you talk about coming back after the attack and, and everything going on. How long was a police investigation going on? Was that something that you were pursuing with the authorities, or was that something that you were just wanting to let it go? And
honestly, as far as I was told, and I wish I could tell you the guy the guy that was in charge of the investigation. He was a really good guy. He and I talked every now and then. And during this point too, I moved to Philly, so I wasn't in the state anymore. But he would keep in contact with me. And one of the last conversations I had with him, because his thing was, he goes, "We all know Rob Black sent these guys, but." And I know a lot of guys are like, why wasn't he ever questioned or anything like that? And I understood the sheriff on this. All right, we go there, we're going to ask him, what is he going to say? I had nothing to do with it, because we didn't have any proof or anything like that. But it came down. He told me it came down from higher ups above his pay grade to leave Rob Black alone, and that was because they were then going to start, or they were in the process of getting ready to, the government was going after Rob or John Ashcraft, and they were going after him for distributing obscene material through the U.S. mail.
Yeah.
So essentially it was just leave him alone. And they did. And I never pressed it. I wasn't one of these guys who was like, I need justice. I'm very much, maybe to a detriment. I'm very much whatever, it's okay. It is what it is.
It's not going to bring the thumb back. It's not going to.
Yeah, it's not. And I'm not one to like dwell on it or anything like that. In fact, dude, I couldn't even tell you the date that it happened. Like I just, when it comes to things like that, whether it's, people close to me passing away and stuff like I can't tell you the dates. Like in my phone, I have reminders for like when my mom passed away, but I don't know the date.
Yeah.
My brain doesn't work that way for whatever reason. And, you know, I mean, not having the thumb, it is what it is. The biggest issue I have is maybe tiny ketchup packets and trying to, tie my daughter's shoes. Other than that, I'm fine, man. Like I don't have any problems.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, look, yeah, your time in CZW as well. You were put in a situation where you were given the Ironman Championship, and then shortly after winning the Ironman Championship, you beat Justice Payne for the world champion and became CZW dual champion. And it was almost like history repeating itself.
Yeah, I thought the same thing. Yeah. I was
Yeah.
like, crap, it's only going to be a couple weeks before I get fired. But no, they again, I don't know what the decision was behind that. I didn't really have any power or say so in CZW. In fact, the first time I won I won the CZW heavyweight championship was in that 64-minute match I had with Flash, Mondo, and Payne. And I mean, as far as I knew, Payne was going to go over, and basically, I think the idea was going to be, or the original plan was that it was going to go to a draw. But then, knowing the Philly crowd, both John Zandig and Justice Payne were like, they're going to crap all over this. They're, especially if we go 60 minutes, they are going to crap if we don't have an actual winner. So the decision was then made to have Mondo go over Flash for the Ironman, and then myself over Payne for the heavyweight. And I was like, "Are you guys sure?" And keep in mind, I'd only been there for like 3 months, 4 months. You guys sure? Like, yeah, that's what we're gonna do. I was like, okay, and Payne, took me aside and just told me, "You're gonna go over me for the heavyweight title." I was like, "You sure?" He's like, "Yeah." And I mean, I've probably talked myself out of going over many times than I care to admit, because I'm always like, "Are you sure? Really? That's what you want to do?" Like, okay, cool, all right. Because I just assume people are always going to crap over or crap on anything that I do, because I usually have a tendency not to like anything that I do. But we did that, and then when they had me go over Adam Flash for the Ironman, I was like, okay. And I didn't know that I was going over Payne for the heavyweight title at Cage of Death. I had no idea.
Yeah.
But that's the decision that they made. But then we had ourselves, booked in a corner as far as, okay, then what do we do with the Ironman title, heavyweight title? Am I going to then wrestle twice on a show? Am I going to, or are we just going to take the Ironman title away from me and then have a tournament? But then shortly after that is when Payne left to go to XPW, and John was asking for my input on things, and that's how the whole thing, like the high five, came up and all that stuff. It was as a result of Payne leaving. So
how was that taken backstage? Like, everybody knows who's watching this, Justice Payne recently passed, and he's a CZW legend, and the big indie wrestling boom in the early to mid 2000s. He was a big part of that, much like yourself.
Yeah.
How was it really? And I don't want to speak bad about anyone either, but how was it taken by the boys and by the management of CZW when Justice Payne was going over to XPW? And more importantly, how did you feel about that? Were you buddies with Payne? Like, did you feel like a bit betrayed that he was going over to work there? Or
when Payne left, I wasn't surprised.
Mm-hmm.
I know Zandig was extremely hurt because that's one of his kids. Guys like basically Lobo, Nick Gage, Justice Payne, wife beater. Those were John's kids. That's who he started CZW with.
Yeah.
Now in Payne's defense, like, he had done everything he could do in CZW. He'd won every title. I mean, he was called the Ultraviolent All-Star for a reason because he won every single title in CZW. When he left, I wasn't surprised. I should have seen it coming only because we had done a show at the arena right before XPW took over the lease at the ECW arena. And we had like one last show there. And if I remember right, it was Payne. It was Justice Payne versus myself and Nick Gage in a three-way dance. But after the show, Payne went out to eat with us, which he never did. He never did that. And it was, if I remember, it was like Payne and myself, Adam Flash. I can't remember who else was there. But he never did that. So he knew that he was leaving. I think by that point, maybe Josh Prohibition and M-Dog 20 had already left, I think. I know guys like Trent Acid and Johnny Kashmere, Adam Flash, they were pissed off. Not because he left, because in their eyes, it was disrespectful to me.
Yeah.
And I always appreciated that. I always appreciate that the guys always having that stance. But it didn't hurt my feelings. In fact, John called me, and if I remember right, it was like, "Oh, you want to know who else just left for XPW?" And I was like, "Justice Payne." He goes, "Oh, you already knew?" I said, "No." Like I wish I could tell you it's a surprise, but no, it really isn't, unfortunately. And John was just really hurt and pissed off by that. But when he left, it was just I actually called Justice Payne. He never picked up the phone. I left him a voice message, and in the message I just went like, "Congratulations," And I don't know if I even said I'm not mad, because I wasn't. I would never begrudge anybody. Dude, go make some money. Yeah. Just make sure those checks clear. But go make your money. I'll never get mad at somebody for making money, ever. The one thing I'm very proud of, and I'm not, I'm proud about my career, is I never buried anybody. I never tried to not have somebody come into a company. I never said, "Don't use this guy." I never said, "Oh, this guy sucks." I've always believed that if you're good at what you do, or if you're good, dude, come on in. And if you can't hang, you can't hang. Now, I know people have done that to me. I know people have said, "Don't use him," blah blah, or if you use him, you can't use this guy. That kind. I know that's happened. But I just left a message for Payne, just saying, "Hey, dude, congratulations. Just watch yourself. Make sure you get paid in cash, and good luck, man." And I'm not mad at you. The next time we spoke was when he came back to CZW, and he took me aside and he apologized for not calling me back. He goes, "I got your message," and it's like, "Yeah, dude, I'm not mad at you." And there's only been one time where I've said, "I'm not putting this guy over," and that's when Justice Payne came back, and John was telling me that he's going to have Payne and I wrestle, and I don't remember what was said, but I do remember telling John, "Okay, I'm not putting the guy over." And John laughed. He goes, "I don't want you to put the guy over." And knowing John the way I know him, I think he appreciated that I just wasn't some pushover, that I was standing my ground. But I'm not going to hold a grudge. I'm not going to be mad at you. It's like, dude, good for you. I think, when it came to myself, I was able to get over in XPW and in CZW. And I'm very proud of that. And back then you didn't have a lot of guys, indie guys, being able to go to each coast, going to the West Coast and the East Coast. Yeah. I was able to actually do both and get over in both. And it's not until now that I can actually look back and think about it, because I didn't realize it at the time, that's a pretty cool, good accomplishment.
That's a massive and especially the Philly crowd in that ECW arena, that like they'll tell you when it's shit, and you guys really won over that crowd. Like I love watching a lot of the older CZW type stuff, and I tell anyone who I like, they go, "Oh, I've never heard of CZW." I said, start in 2002 and watch that whole year. That to me is like the really launch of the company when guys like you were there, the characters that were being developed, and especially High Five and that coming into prominence as well with you guys, when you were put with a bunch of guys which basically looked like they were just your closest friends in the business, and you're put to there, and you guys just looked like you had a fucking great time every time that you were going out there. And you look at the guys like Trent Acid, Johnny Cashmere, Adam Flash, B-Boy, Nate Hatred, Dewey Donovan as well.
Yeah.
How did that whole, and you sort of just briefly touched on it, how Justice Payne leaving was really the driving force to creating High Five.
Yeah, basically what happened was Payne was a heel, and after he left, John was just like, we don't have any main event heels. Like we need a main event heel. And I don't remember the name of the show, but I was going to wrestle Mondo, and I told John, I'm like, dude, John, I can go heel if you want. And he's like, oh, no, whatever. Then let me think about it. Okay. And the way I remember it, like I'm literally about to go out to do my match, or maybe it's the match before I go out with Mondo, and John just pulls me inside and goes, "Go heel." It's like, okay, I'll go heel. Like, all right. And then they already had the plan of they were going to take Dewey Donovan off the Hate Club and put him on the back seats anyway. And my whole thing was, okay, well, why am I turning heel? Again, I try to be rational about this, or like I just, you're not going to be a bad guy just to be a bad guy or whatever. I mean, I guess you could look at it that way, but I was like, okay, talking to John, I'm like, why am I turning heel? And we're trying to think about it. I said, okay, the reason I'm turning heel, because I think he wanted to put the back seats with me. And I said, okay, well, this is the way we can do it. I have both titles. I have a big, I have a big mark on my back now. I need protection. I'm the CZW champion and the Iron Man champion. I need protection. Everybody's gunning for me because I have both titles. Yep. So that's my reasoning for turning heel. It's I'm doing it out of just to save myself essentially. And he's like, okay, that's cool. And I think we even cut promos with that. And so when I walked out, it wasn't like there was this big setup. I just walked out with a different attitude. Someone tried to come over and, a fan tried to touch me on the shoulder. I'd go, hey, don't touch me, kind of thing. And they're like, what's up his ass? Like, what the hell? Like, okay. And then if I remember right, the back seats came out and helped me win. And then John always wanted to bring B-Boy back to CZW because B-Boy had only done like best of the best, one-offs. And because B-Boy and I were both from the West Coast in California, all right, that's why B-Boy's with us now, because I'm bringing him in. It's like, okay. And then Nate was put part of it because essentially we needed a heater. We needed, big guy, where we can talk crap and everything and then, hide behind a guy. That's huge. And that was Nate Hatred. And it worked out really, really well. And I'm glad that you could tell, like, we were having a good time because we were having a blast, man. Like we were having such a good time. And I hung out with these guys outside of the shows. We all went to this place called the Berwyn Tavern. A guy named Ian Knox worked there.
The Irish drinking team guy.
Yeah. Ian's actually one of the guys who came up with the name High Five because we couldn't we had no idea what to call ourselves. And Ian, Johnny Cashmere, and Trent Acid went to Amsterdam on a trip for a show. And I guess they were just high and they're coming up with this stuff. And the whole High Five came up, and the big sticking point was it's HI Roman numeral V. That way the fans can chant, HIV at us. And I was like, okay, I'm cool with that. In fact, and no one ever brings it up, but it's one of the funniest promos I've ever been part of is when we introduced the High Five name, and Eric Gargiulo was interviewing Trent Acid, Johnny Cashmere, and myself in the ring. And I think Dewey was with us too. I can't remember. But they started chanting at Trent like Trent has herpes or something like that, and Trent just opened up his pants and looked down at his junk. I was like, no, I don't got it. He showed Johnny, and Johnny looked down like, no. And he comes over and shows me. The guy doesn't have underwear on. He's really naked, and he's really showing. And I was like, what the like? No, he doesn't have herpes. No, he doesn't have herpes. No, I just always. It was one of the funniest things that he ever did to me because I thought it was just hilarious.
And you know what? Talking about Trent Acid, he's another guy that, obviously, unfortunately, taken way too soon. And, another guy who really could have been a top level talent in the business and could have been, who could have gone very, very far.
Yeah.
But one of the things I really dug about Trent Acid when they had his entrances and they go and weighing in at 9.5 inches, to me, I pop for that so huge. Even now, like when I hear it, like I'm 30, like 37, and even now I hear it and I can't help but laugh. But how did you obviously? And as I said, you definitely saw that group when you guys were together in the ring and doing your thing, that you did have that close connection. How did obviously to go into the cage of death match that year, the show prior is when you guys really stepped it up a level, and you end up hanging John Zandig from meat hooks.
Oh yeah, jeez.
Yeah, like, dude, who came up with that idea? I'm assuming it was Zandig's idea.
Oh yeah, no, that was Zandig. The reason we did that was because John and I were supposed to have I guess like a death match. And we were building up and building it up. And the athletic commission, the Philly Athletic Commission, came in and said, you can't use light tubes. You can't use, essentially, like, no blood, all this, because of something that happened at an XPW show, I believe, where XPW was running shows in Philly. And I think Angel and Supreme had a death match. And Angel, they went in the crowd and went into the restroom area or something like that. And Angel bled on like some girl who turned out to be like the daughter of the athletic commission's friend or something like that. It was something like that. So
wow.
Then the edict came down from the athletic commission. No more light tubes. You can't do any of this stuff. And in John's mind, we had built up the match to something that we just couldn't hit the mark that we wanted to, as a result of not being able to do all the stuff that John likes to do.
Yeah.
And so John's idea was then all right, I'm just hanging from meat hooks because the athletic commission said nothing about that. So
yeah, that was uncomfortable to what, like,
yeah,
like, you know what I mean, like, but that's where you were going for, you know what I mean, like, and it worked, and like, dude, that was some crazy shit. Like, there's no way in the world I could ever imagine going, yeah, dude, just stick some meat hooks in my back and let's do this. Like,
yeah, no, like he did that in Wax was the guy who set him up. Wax used to take photos at CZW, and he also he was wrestling a little bit too, but Wax was all into that weird stuff, the meat hooks and all that stuff. So he's the one that got John all prepped and ready to do it. And then, he's telling us in the ring to like push him because I guess it doesn't hurt as much if you're swinging, which I okay, whatever. So that's why, you'll see me and like Trent will go up to him and then act like we're punching him like, Rocky, and like Rocky does with the frozen meat, like we're punching him. And then John says, get everybody out of the arena. I'm like, what? So then, abruptly, we're just telling these people, get out of the ring. The show's done. Show's closed. Get out of here. It's like, oh, okay. All right. And so that's what we did. And I remember telling John, dude, because I've always respected John because he would never ask you to do something he himself would not do.
Yeah.
So I remember going to John going, hey, if you want me to hang from meat hooks, I'll do it too. But I remember thinking after I said it going, I'm not going to do that. No way am I going to do that. But he was just hardcore that way. And anything to make it memorable. Now, I think in retrospect, we kind of did more harm than good, because I think it turned people off.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to see that, but that's where he then got the idea to do the Cage of Death 5, the suspended thing, because I just talking to John about how, dude, for Cage of Death we need to do like a war game style type of match, man, because there's 5 of us, you can get 5 guys, blah blah. Now I never said like let's have a ramp hanging in the air and then 2 rings, one filled with a million thumbtacks. Like that was never my idea. I just said let's do war games. And John's the one who came up with the whole contraption of what we ended up doing.
Yeah, that was that match that you guys had there. There was a lot of great elements in it. New Jack was also involved in that match. Ian Knox as well was also in that match.
He took a huge bump. Yeah.
Yeah, like Hatred was on your side, but he did the turn. You had Nick Gage as well was there, wife beater. Actually, no, wife beater was there, I think. So
yeah, he was in it.
Yeah, and how did you guys like to do a match like that? Like, how did you guys really come together to make sure that you were able to pull off what you're wanting to pull off? Like having 10 dudes in the ring, like obviously that's going to be quite chaotic.
It's a huge clusterfuck is what it is. I think we were able to pull that match off because the big thing, we were all friends. We all looked out for each other. We all hung out with each other outside of outside the shows. I mean, not New Jack, and not really Zandig. Zandig never hung out with us, but we were excited to do it, and none of us knew what. Like, I had no idea what the match was going to look like. All I knew was John kept on throwing out this word suspended, like suspended. I'm like, Cage of Death suspended. I'm like, oh, okay. And a million thumbtacks or whatever it was. So when we got to the arena, we saw that and was like, oh, okay. So this is what he wants to do. All right. And then John was really good about, he would always come up with ideas for guys. Like he goes, I think it'd be cool if you guys did this. Do you think you could pull off this? So John's idea was like for me at the end to be hoisted up by Nate Hatred and Nick Gage, and then thrown into the back into the cage or into the ring onto the table full of thumbtacks. That was his idea. The guys just started coming up with their own thing. The thing was that we were all professional enough, and we all knew when to take a break. Like, because we all knew what was going to happen. So it was like, all right, at this point, because unfortunately, in these kind of matches, especially on an indie level, you'll see a lot of guys doing a lot of stuff, in a corner trying to do spots when, everyone should be looking at this one specific thing that they want you to look at. But these guys are doing their own thing because they want to get their shit in. We just knew how to act and what to do, and like Johnny Kashmir has great facials in that match. Something happens and you just see his eyes get all big and his mouth is open. He's like, like he couldn't believe it. My biggest gripe with the match, or my only gripe with the match, is I wanted all of us to be carted out. We just went through a war. Let's look like we went through a war. After I got eliminated, I got taken out on a table kind of thing, like a stretcher job. Ian Knox doing that big bump that he did, he should have never come back in the ring. My thing was just, we got to make it look like we just went through a war. None of us will be the same after this, essentially, but after the match, here comes Ian running to the ring, the good guys win and everything. And everyone's, yay. Dude, we just went through this huge war. We all need to look like we went through that. And there isn't going to be like, everybody's fine, but it's going to take a couple of weeks for these guys to feel better, kind of thing. That was my only gripe about it. But
I can see where you're coming from, though. Like, you really want to sell the fact that you guys just had this war and ultra violent, clusterfuck. 5-on-5.
Yeah.
Mate. But to me, honestly, in watching it, the match to me still holds up years later. And
thanks, man.
I still enjoy it. But listen, Billy, we've had you for an hour and 40 minutes. I know you're a busy guy. You're a busy family man. What have you been up to lately, man? Do you still have anything to do with the business at all? Are you still involved anyway?
No, I mean, honestly, I have really nothing to do with the business anymore. The last thing I did was for Game Changer for GCW about a year ago. I did like a run in on Nick Gage's match with the actor guy. I can't remember his name now. Really nice guy though.
Dave Arquette?
David Arquette. Yeah, I did a run in on that. They've been when they've been back to LA, they've asked me to come back, or I've even reached out to them. Hey, can I come to the show? I'm like, yeah, of course. But I've never been able to make it back to a show. I mean, the last thing I did was last year was I got inducted to the Southern
CZW
California.
and
Well,
that,
I got the CZW Hall of Fame back in January of 2019, and then during the summer I got inducted into the SoCal Deathmatch Hall of Fame, which is just a new thing with Supreme. So I got to do that. I mean, I'd like to do more stuff with wrestling if I could. I just need to be able to make the time because I don't want to be one of these guys that 1 foot in, 1 foot out. If I'm in, I'm in, and give it my full attention. But like you said, I mean, I got a little one that you just met, Macy, and I got a 19-year-old daughter, and I just like being home. I get asked why I stopped wrestling. I never meant to stop wrestling. It just kind of happened. I had a lot of injuries that I never took care of, and it was all right. Let me take care of these injuries, and I just got used to being home. And then when I wasn't home and I was on the road, I realized how much I really hate traveling. Like I hate being cooped up in an airplane for 5 hours because it's not like you're going first class or anything like that,
no.
Or being in a car by myself for another 5 hours. It was just I hated that aspect of the business. I always loved the in-ring aspect. It was just the traveling aspect that I always hated.
And that's the thing in the wrestling business. The travel goes hand in hand with the in ring. You know what I mean? Like it's part of.
Yeah.
In order to do the in ring, you've got to be able to travel and so forth. But Billy, where can people find you? Do you have social media where people can follow you and see what you're up to?
Honestly, I don't. Shoot. I mean, I got like a Facebook page, but I mean, all it is just pictures of my kids and my wife and stuff like that. I'm that guy now, that annoying guy who posts videos and pictures of his kids. They're just Billy Messiah on Facebook. I mean, I always enjoy, talking to people and fans. If someone reaches out to me and, writes me something, I try my best to write back. It might not be right away, but I do try to write back and say thank you because I know they're taking time out of their day to do it. So I really do appreciate that. I appreciate you taking the time to sit down and talk to me too.
Yeah, no, it's been an absolute honor and definitely something that was very excited of doing. But before we head off, Billy, if you can just hang on a second afterwards, I just wanted to do a couple of plugs and just say that I wanted to make special thanks to Brothers of the Belt, Wrestling Review Society, Generational Wrestling Society, Love Those Wrestling Belts, WCW Nation, and Defend Deathmatch Wrestling International for allowing me to stream my show in their pages, also in my page, Multi-Continental Wrestling Alliance, and also our YouTube page, which is Multi-Continental Wrestling Alliance. Ladies and gentlemen, you've been sitting here, you've been joined by myself, Piers Austin, on an episode of Shooting the Shit with our guest, Billy the Messiah Welsh. Billy, thank you so much for coming on, man. We really appreciate it.
No, thanks for having me. It was my pleasure, and I enjoyed it, man. Thank you very much.
No worries. We'll catch you next time, guys.
Take it easy.